Hello, everyone, and welcome to my podcast. My name is Stuart Teicher, and Michael, I didn't tell you that the podcast has a new name now. I told you that it was called the Ethics is Cool podcast when I originally asked you to appear, but I'm now calling it the Good Lawyers Gone Bad podcast. And let me tell you why. I can explain to you and to everybody else why I'm changing it. The main reason is that when I talked exclusively about attorney ethics, nobody listened to my podcast. So I decided to do something a little different. My podcast is called Good Lawyers Gone Bad, and every month I tell a story about exactly what it sounds like, a good lawyer who's gone bad. I call it the only true lawyer crime podcast, where I find lawyers who have committed crimes and I tell the stories. But what I decided to do is, because I'm still very passionate about talking to lawyers about ethics issues, is that the episode of the podcast every month, one episode tells the story. The other episode, I do 2 episodes a month. The other episode is not Good Lawyers Gone Bad. I'm calling it Good Lawyers Staying Good. And I'm trying to incorporate the ethics stuff that I love to talk about for lawyers into this portion of the podcast. So I've had a couple of different people that I've spoken to already in your position, and it was called the Ethics is Cool podcast, so I had to kind of retrofit it. But you're the first one that I'm officially doing as the Good Lawyers Stay Good portion of the podcast.
All right, I'm honored. Thank you.
So today we are with Michael Kennedy, and if it feels as if I'm a little bit more social with Michael than some of the last people that I've interviewed, there's a reason, because we know each other already. So Michael, how about if you explain to us who you are, introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks for having me. I'm Mike Kennedy. I'm Bar Counsel in Vermont. Most of you probably have some idea what that means, but basically in a nutshell, I spent the first 12 years of my career in legal ethics being a disciplinary prosecutor. And then we decided here in Vermont, well, why are we putting all our resources into prosecuting lawyers instead of trying to help them stay good, like the name of the podcast? And so we changed the way we do things a little bit. And my role now, and has been for several years, is to lawyers can call me up and with, hey, Mike, I got this going on in my, what do you think I should do? And I point them to the rule or to the advisory ethics opinion or whatever and try to help them stay good. So it fits well with the new title. That's me in a nutshell.
So you touched on one of the things that I was going to ask you about in the beginning a little bit. How did you get involved in this industry altogether? You started off as disciplinary counsel. Did you start there? What did you do before that?
So before that, I was an assistant attorney general for the state of Vermont. First 4 years, I was assigned to defend the Department of Corrections against suits brought by or on behalf of incarcerated people. From there, I became the state's commitment prosecutor. So I prosecuted the involuntary commitment cases. I did not get into this current industry because I knew anything about it or because it was a lifelong dream of mine. A former boss of mine in the AG's office became the head of the disciplinary office here in Vermont, offered me a position as her deputy. I said yes for no other reason than it included health insurance, which at the time I did not have. So I took the job, and that was 24 years ago, and the rest is history, as they say.
I'll tell you, I think every person I've spoken to about this with your position, either disciplinary counsel, bar counsel, that sort of thing, every single person got their job by knowing someone who said the job is available. I teach undergraduates legal writing at Rutgers. And when I teach my legal writing class, I tell them it's really not just about legal writing, but about being a professional going forward. And the importance of networking can't be undersold,
Right. Yeah, 100% agree.
That's incredible. So you said that you started off as disciplinary counsel, and that you, as the bar, you made a decision that you were going to, tell me a little bit about that, because different jurisdictions do it differently. A lot of them only have disciplinary counsel, right, and they don't even have that bar counsel angle. Sounds to me, after speaking to some people, that it seems to be a paradigm shift, that we're starting to go at it from 2 angles. Can you tell me more about that?
Sure. So we made the decision in 2012. I don't know that we were the first, but we were one of the first jurisdictions to do it. And it came out of, Stuart, you've read a ton of disciplinary decisions, and whenever a Supreme Court or a disciplinary body, panel, whatever, they go through the findings of fact and conclusions of law. Then they get to the part about sanction, and they almost always say something like, the purpose of sanction is not to punish the lawyer, but to educate the bar and reinforce the public's confidence in a self-regulating profession, something like that. So we started thinking about it. Well, if the purpose isn't to punish and the purpose is to educate the bar, why are we doing so and to protect the public? Why are we doing so after the injury, so to speak, has occurred? Let's put more into keeping fires from starting instead of only responding after the fire has started. So instead of having a full-time prosecutor who had a full-time deputy, what we decided to do was split the two roles into different offices, where one was focused on the prevention and the preventative advice. And no matter how much of that you do, you still are going to have the lawyers who go bad, like the name of the podcast, who need to be prosecuted. So that side of things is always going to exist. And what we tried to do was do more upfront to keep the lawyers from who are never going to go bad, to keep them from stumbling sort of accidentally into an ethics violation.
So what sort of stuff do you do in that role to be able to help lawyers in that regard? Is it responding? Like, do you have a hotline? How's that work?
Yeah, it's lots of states call it a hotline. We don't have a dedicated 800 number, so to speak, but lawyers can email me, call me, text me, whatever, and just ask questions. Do a lot of CLEs, have the blog, do some other stuff for our board, but that's really how it works. It's very hotline-esque.
And that blog is awesome, by the way. I know I've told you this before, but it is fantastic for anybody who wants to stay on top of whatever the latest and greatest is, and the most important issues that are out there. Your blog is fantastic. I think I told you when we met for the first time, I wrote back, Kim from the bar said, you know, you're going to meet Michael. I said, are you kidding me? He's a rock star in the world of attorney ethics. Sure. Can lawyers do or can they ask you questions anonymously, or do they always have to say who they are?
It could be anonymous. I don't know that I've ever gotten an anonymous sort of contact or an inquiry. Maybe I have in that, well, Mike, I'm not calling about me. I'm calling about somebody else, something like that.
Right.
But
so I have this friend.
Right. Where the anonymity comes in is our rules were changed. I can't tell anybody. You know, if you call me up and ask for guidance, I cannot tell anybody unless you give me permission to. And I've been exempted from our mandatory reporting rule.
That's great, and that's very consistent with what I think you see in a lot of even the model rule, where it says, you know, if someone seeks help from a lawyer's assistance program, it's exempted from the reporting requirement. Only makes sense to do it with you too, if that's what your role is.
Right.
And a sort of related but unrelated question that I was thinking about the other day in a different topic. When it comes to, and I'm going a little bit off track here for a second, when it comes to reporting another lawyer's misconduct under 8.3, can lawyers do that anonymously, or is that something they have to do, you know, to identify themselves?
We do not have a specific rule here on Vermont. What we've done is left it to the prosecutor to decide, can I go forward without a complaining witness, if you will, or do I need someone? So we will accept the anonymous complaint. The person's desire to remain anonymous goes into the prosecutor's decision whether to go forward or not.
And then I guess from the lawyer's point of view, they have to prove, if something happens down the line, they may have to prove that they complied with Rule 8.3a. So I would assume that as long as they keep the proper records and can show later they were the person who was the source of that anonymous complaint, they'll probably be okay, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's what I would figure. All right, like I said, I went off the beaten path there because I was dealing with that issue recently. So what do you think is the thing that surprised you most about whether it's the disciplinary system where you worked before being bar counsel or now as bar counsel? Is there anything about the system that surprised you the most?
This will sound awful, Stuart, but what surprised me most when I first took the job is I expected the bar to be sort of anti-me, not me a person, but anti my role. And I was surprised, and it remains so today. it was the complete opposite. I think that the bar as a whole at large, they want the bad lawyers sanctioned. They want misconduct responded to. They appreciate the job that we do. And I was really surprised at, I guess, the lack of pushback that I got when I was first hired as a disciplinary prosecutor. And I think that's a good thing. And I'm glad that it remains the sentiment.
Yeah, I always told people, you know, because I mentioned to you before that I sit on the disciplinary board here in New Jersey, and I still tell people that the only reason I continue to do it is because we don't go after people who are just trying to comply with the rules and make a mistake and stuff like that. I always say that the only people that we get are those who deserve to get got.
Right.
And the other lawyers, like you said, seem to appreciate that because, well, for obvious reasons. What about the angle, the end of seeking, you know, bar counsel's assistance? Do you get a lot of lawyers who reach out to you?
I do. I get around 1,200 a year. I don't know. We only have around 2,800 licensed attorneys in Vermont. I get around 1,200 inquiries a year. I don't know what surprises me about that, other than it never ceases to amaze me how often I tell myself, "Oh man, Mike, you are so lucky you're not in private practice." Because some of the issues that these lawyers face, you know, I have the luxury of my job is to know what the rules are. I mean, as you know, they're not very long, so it doesn't take you long to know what they all say. So I can sit around and pretty much know what the rules are. These people have to deal with things on the fly, and sometimes I do, you know, say a little thank you that, hey, I don't have to deal with the clients in real time or these issues in real time.
Yeah, yeah. You know, a lot of people who aren't lawyers don't appreciate the pressure for that reason. You know, there's always the pressure of working for your clients and doing that kind of stuff, but the pressure of being able to comply with the rules. And you never look at the rules. You know, when you got an issue, you never
Right.
look at the rules and say, oh, that's perfect. That's exactly what my answer is. It's
Right.
always in the gray area.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Are there any sort of consistent issues that you see from lawyers who are reaching out to you?
Yeah. Well, the lawyers who reach out to me, of those 1,200, half every year, and this is 11 years now, involve conflicts of interest questions
Yeah.
because, and I think that's probably the same everywhere, comes up often here because we're such a small state and you're constantly running into the same people, witnesses, parties over and over and over again. So there's lots of conflicts questions. Plus, as you know, they can be hard to sort through the different type, you know, former client, prospective client, current client. Other than that, some trust accounting seems to come up more often than other issues, but it's mainly conflicts and the associated issues with confidentiality and withdrawal.
Yeah, yeah. I have a friend of mine who I went to law school with, who I talked to a little while ago, and he's a partner in a big firm. And I was asking him about conflicts because I called him to talk to him about like his conflicts procedure. You know, like
Yeah.
not trying to get inside information, just to say how does it work. You know, I've never been in big law, and it's been a long time since I've really, you know, had multiple lawyers in an office. Even for me, I was a solo for a long time. So I said, how does it work? And as we talked about it, what I realized was I was shocked at how little he understood about the actual rule. You know, he generally thought he understood conflicts, and he generally did, but I was surprised at how little he understood about the way the mechanics of the rule actually work.
Yeah. Yeah. I just did a blog post about that yesterday about how surprised I am that lawyers don't understand the former client conflict analysis. And so I agree with you. Sometimes it is surprising, like, well, that's not exactly the way what the rules say.
Is there a particular portion of that? You're talking about Rule 1.9, right? Is there a
Yeah.
particular portion of that surprised you that they didn't understand? I'd love to hear what it is.
Yeah. So what comes up over and over again in my experience is, well, Mike, yeah, I think the new client is adverse to a former client, but you know what? I don't remember anything about that former client's case. So all is good, right? No, that all is not good. The I don't remember or I can't access the file is not part of Rule 1.9. And it always surprises me how willing lawyers are to talk themselves into Well, that's the answer. I don't remember, so no big deal.
So what is the standard? Where's the section? Like, do you have the ABA's comment 3 in Vermont?
I'm not sure if it exactly tracks, but I always point lawyers to ours. Might be in comment 4. I can't remember, but it talks about the standard in Vermont is it same case or a substantially related case, and usually you can figure out same matter. Substantially related is where lawyers get caught up, but that's the standard in Vermont. If this is substantially related to the former matter in which you represented someone who's now materially adverse to the new client, that's a conflict. It doesn't matter whether you remember anything about the case. In
Right.
fact, our Supreme Court has said we are going to presume that you did receive confidential information in the substantially related case in which you represented the former client, and we're not going to make them disclose that confidence in order to protect it. And that we do have a comment that talks about what does it mean to be substantially related, which generally tracks the ABA comment.
Yes, and that's the part that I tell when I teach my law students about this. I always tell them I focus on the exact same section, that substantially related test, and I tell them I'm going to teach you something that when you get out into the practice, you will be one of the few who actually know it. And that
That's
is
right.
that comment, just what you said, they don't talk about what you actually remembered. The comment, and it's probably different in Vermont because the numbering,
Yeah.
every state changes it a little.
Yeah.
The ABA comment asks what you normally would have learned in
Right.
that prior representation.
That's what our comment says. It's any information that you actually did receive. If it's cases can be the same or substantially related if they're the same transaction, or if it's the type of case in which the information ordinarily would have been imparted to the type of information that ordinarily would have been imparted to the lawyer in that representation, then this one is substantially related to the one in which you have a former client.
Yeah, and it's just so important when you're practicing in multiple states, like a lot of
Yeah.
people in the Northeast do, that you understand those nuances. If I remember correctly, for instance, in my home state of New Jersey, they changed it, and I'm pretty sure, I haven't looked at it in a while, I'm pretty sure that they have the actual knowledge standard
Oh, okay.
in New
All
Jersey.
right.
I think I looked at it years ago. It's been a little while since I checked that, but I could swear that there might be. Anyway, I just think it's interesting when lawyers are particularly from our neck of the woods, which is the Northeast, because
Yeah.
so many people are barred in multiple
Right.
states. You got to be careful and check
right.
those rules. Yeah, so that kind of stuff fascinates me, and I always say I'm an ethics geek, so I can geek out. I could talk to you all day about that comment. I
Yeah.
don't think everybody else wants to hear about that comment
Right.
so
Okay.
much. So, okay, next question. And I'm curious to know if your feeling about this is the same as mine. If you had to choose or pick what you think is the quickest way for a lawyer to get into the disciplinary system, involuntarily, of course, right? The
Yeah.
quickest way for a lawyer to end up with a grievance, what do you think that would be? And I don't necessarily mean a particular rule, which is fine, or just a general occurrence. What do you think?
So in my experience, it's been this, and it's the failure to set a reasonable expectation at the outset of the representation. And that can happen no matter the practice area, and there are plenty of examples. But I think what happens is sometimes lawyers don't want to tell the client bad news. They don't give them bad news. And,
Right.
the client says, hey, this case is worth 500 grand, right? And the lawyer said, yeah, we're going to get you 500 grand. Knowing full well, if I get you 30 grand, that's going to be a win. But then when you get 60 grand, which is even more than they should have expected, it's not the 500 grand. And you never disabused them of that notion. So you didn't do anything wrong, but you didn't get to the result that they thought they were going to get. And I think that happens across practice areas where you got to make sure clients have a reasonable expectation about what they will achieve, because if you don't manage that expectation, when they don't achieve the unreasonable, they're going to file a complaint. Is the complaint going to go anywhere? No, it's not. However, it's not fun to go through the process. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
that's
right. I tell lawyers that all the time. Once you get into the system, it takes a
yeah,
while to get out. Even
right.
if it's not warranted, they still have to do the. I mean, sometimes they can just dismiss it right off the bat. But if there's a modicum of evidence, they got to assign it to an investigator. They got to look at it. They got to go
Right.
through the thing, and that could be. And since it takes time to do that, it could be 6 months of hell until it's finally
Yes,
done.
that's
But,
exactly right. A couple
but
other ways we've seen,
yeah,
sometimes I think number two after that is sometimes it surprises me the bills that lawyers will pursue, and when they pursue a bill that maybe they should just let go. that client's likely to file a complaint. And then obviously, trust account overdrafts, they're automatically reported to our disciplinary office by the banks, and that's a pretty easy way to get hauled into the system.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think it's consistent. The stuff that you talked about, with the exception of the trust account, which is a separate issue that's obvious, the other
Yeah.
stuff kind of fits in with my theory that I always talk about, and that is that I think the quickest way to get into the system is to piss off your client.
Right. Yeah.
And that's exactly what you're talking about, those reasonable expectations. They don't adjust it, unreasonable
Yep.
expectations. They don't
Yeah.
adjust it. They don't tell them that things have changed. And then what ends up happening is the client gets angry.
Yeah. Exactly. It can't be their fault. They're mad at somebody, and the lawyer's a natural person to take it out on.
Yeah. So many times that lawyers would have probably gotten away with doing something wrong, and nobody ever would have reported it had they not also, made the client angry and then
Right.
forced
In
them
the
to go
process.
ahead. It's incredible.
Yeah.
All right, got another question for you. Different topic. Have you
Okay.
seen anything in your neck of the woods about generative AI yet? We've obviously seen generative AI, guidelines coming down from different states, and it's all the time. Have you actually had anybody asking you about? Obviously, not asking you to reveal information you can't, but just generally speaking, have you seen it actually pop up in the practice at all, other than just advisory opinions and stuff?
No, we have a commission on it now, like every other state seems to have done, where I'm actually on the commission. I have not seen any problems, I'll say right now, with the lawyers' use of generative AI in Vermont, like we saw with, the Avianca case or some of those others. I know lawyers are using it. I've had lawyers tell me that they're using it. I used it just to make a point that, hey, it's out there. If you don't know that it's out there, that's a problem. You should, because it might be helpful to you. And I used it to prove a point, which I wish I hadn't proven, that my job might be one of the first ones to go when as AI evolves. And what I had done, Stuart, was I typed in the 3 most common questions I get in the ethics inquiries I receive into ChatGPT, and it nailed the 3 answers. So, but I know lawyers are using AI and generative AI here in Vermont. Haven't seen any ethical issues with it yet.
Don't be so sure that you're going to be. I did similar sorts of things, right? So I there's 2 things that came up with me. First, I created a CLE program that I was going to use ChatGPT to do all of the research for me. Right. So I used it all. And obviously you and I know the rules. So when it
Yeah.
comes back with something wrong, we know what's wrong. So I'm looking at it, and it got so many of the things wrong that
Huh.
I changed the name of the title of the program to ChatGPT is an ethical idiot.
Okay.
And that's the name of the program. But the other
All
thing
right.
also, just yesterday I was doing a program, right? And I looked foolish, and I was very upset with myself. I was copying the rules from the PDFs that the rules come out on the websites, and then
Yeah.
pasting them into your slideshow can be a little bit of a pain in the butt
Yeah.
because the formatting is all wrong. So I
Yeah.
realized that if I ask ChatGPT for the rule, it'll bring the rule up, and when I copy it and paste it, there's no formatting, so it's much easier. Yesterday I was doing that, and I copied and pasted, and just to give you an example, like Rule 5.1, the rule on being an advisor, it's got 3 subsections, right? So I copied it and pasted. I saw A, B, C, C1 and 2. I'm like, that's the right one. I looked at it later, and it got the rule wrong. It had the right, I realized it while I was giving the program. And I saw that it basically took subsection A, summarized it, then put subsection A where B is, and then C was correct. So the idea, and what really gets me is that I think that lawyers who don't know the details, in a lot of instances, will get fooled by those systems, and they'll think that it's right. And that's the part that really scares me, is not knowing enough to know what you need to
Right.
double check.
Right. Great point.
Yeah. Anyway, I always ask about that because I think it's just such a hot topic right now. So if there's anything that you could get lawyers in your jurisdiction to stop doing, what would that be? And it might be something that we already talked about, but I'm just curious.
Well, 2 things, I think. First, I'm always surprised at how lawyers know the bad client when the client walks in, and they take them anyway.
Mm.
And I think sometimes, again, I don't have to deal with, uh, generating revenue or making sure that a practice stays open so I can pay my staff. But I think sometimes lawyers make an economic decision that's a bad decision. That's not going to be worth the money in the end. And I think you all know who the bad clients are. Don't take them. Similar to that, I'm always surprised at how willing lawyers are to take not necessarily a client who's in conflict with another client, but they're willing to represent both sides of a transaction and tell themselves, well, I'll just be a scrivener. Well, you're
Mm.
not really a scrivener. You're giving legal advice to each side. And what do you do when one of them says, hey, is this a good deal for me? Um, and so I'm surprised by that. And then I guess the last thing I wish lawyers would do less of, I think we all talk too much about our cases. I
Yeah.
don't think we realize how strict Rule 1.6 is, and we without meaning any harm, we disclose an awful lot of information relating to a representation of a client uh, without authorization or need to do so.
I had a law student who addressed that last one once that I thought was in an interesting way, and it was a little bit unrealistic, and it was basic out of anger. But I think there's a little, but I respected it. And what they said was, why do we even continue to have the rule that you can't talk about client cases anymore? He said, I understand why we have the rule, and I understand the basis for it. He said, nobody follows it.
That's right.
Nobody follows it. They've never followed it. And no matter how many times you talk about they don't follow it. So why are we even fooling ourselves by continuing to have this? Now, I know the answer why, but I do think it's an
Right.
interesting way of looking at it.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. And so many people violate that one.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And they don't feel it. They don't realize it's
They don't.
happening. And everybody does it. So
Yeah,
they think it's okay.
I think we're going to keep seeing that too, Stuart, in the negative online review area.
Yeah.
People feel like, oh, they said something about me. Well, I have license to respond,
Right.
and that's just one small area. It happens much broader than that, but I agree with you that we talk an awful lot as lawyers, and I wish we wouldn't so much.
Yeah. I want to touch on one of the things you just said, and then I'll let you go because I don't want to keep you all day. I know
Okay.
it's a work day. You talked about not taking that bad client, which
Yep.
is a great idea. The one, especially the one who's been through 5, 6 different lawyers. Now they come to you, right?
Yep.
One of the things that I tell lawyers is dumping clients you hate. And I say, if you don't like a client, find a way to get rid of them because you're just going to end up messing up the file. You're going to approach it half-assed and something's going to go wrong. And I understand that clients don't grow on trees and you can't just throw money out the window. But to the extent that you can get rid of them, do it. And my question to you is, if a lawyer asked you, what's the proper way for me to dump a client? What would they need to worry about or be concerned about to do right in discharging a client?
Well, first of all, sometimes what I think lawyers forget is maybe the client wants out too. You can always just ask the client, is this working for you? Because it's not working for me. And I think sometimes the answer is, well, I didn't know I had the option of leaving you. Can you refer me to somebody else? I think that's a fair first question. After that, what I always tell lawyers is, look, take a look at Rule 1.16. It's going to tell you the ways that you're allowed out. There's 3 ways where you're required to get out, and several other that you're permitted to get out. If you can arguably fit into one of those paragraphs, it's not frivolous to try to get out. Don't make up reasons, don't lie, but there are plenty of ways that you can get out.
But like you said, you can also get out by mutual agreement, right? Just have a conversation, and then let's assume that they agree mutually that it's not working. They should probably send like a disengagement letter to the client, correct?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in I know people are busy, and I know it's one of the last things we think about, but I think whenever you can turn a client into a former client and confirm that in a disengagement letter, it's a very good idea.
Yep.
Even if it's a client, say an institutional client at a big law firm that you're going to represent again down the road, still turn that matter into a former matter. I just think it's better.
Yeah,
Cleaner.
because it's clear. One of the things that we always deal with that maybe lawyers don't realize is when they say I've got a conflict with a former client, establishing that they're actually a former client is part of the process.
Are they a former client? Yeah, exactly. Great point.
Awesome. Well, Mike, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I know you got to go to work and help some lawyers, so I don't want to keep you all day. Thank you very much
Thank you for
for being.
having me. I think you're the rock star because you're out there doing this all over the place. So I love what you do, and I really appreciate it. And thank you for all the work that you do to help make our jobs easier.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.
All right.
Bye bye.